Hello, and welcome to Magical Journey. I am your host, Daniel Cahoon. So, today we're going to talk about paranormal phenomena, and I really want to talk about this in the broad sense, touching over some of the topics of the paranormal. Um, we're going to start out with talking about ghosts and spirits, because that's one of the less complicated, and they're all kind of complicated in their own way. But we're gonna camp here for a few moments and talk about the spirit world. So first of all, ghost spirits, earthbound spirits. I really have a hard time wrapping my head around uh, the what fors as to why some spirits are earthbound, or if they are actual spirits, even sometimes, to be honest with you, because I believe in some cases, definitely there are demons that uh, pose as earthbound spirits. But I am not one of those people that want to point fingers at everything and pull the demon card on every single thing, because I don't know for a fact to start with. And the other thing is I want to keep an open mind. I don't want to be one of those people who just say, "Oh, everything's a demon," because there's enough of those in the world. So it's kind of one of those things where I feel like when it comes to spirits, I think you need to test the spirit first of all. And what I mean by that is by saying that, using the name of Jesus, for instance, to see if there's a reaction, and if there's a negative reaction or a violent reaction, then there's a good chance that you probably have a demon in front of you, or at least somebody who is um, not necessarily a good person. So there's that. Um, do I really believe that all of the ghostly activity is attached to this world? No, I do not. I believe there are interdimensional beings that come into play at times. I believe sometimes um, time and space may somehow glitch and fold. And some of the things that we see are and call spirits or hauntings is actually when time and space folds and you are witnessing something happening in another place and another time, but in the same spot. Like I said, it gets complicated. It all gets complicated. But that is one of my theories, one of my beliefs. I've seen, I've actually veered out away uh, from seeing people walking down the street and walking right in my path that weren't really there. Um, I've even like stopped and prolonged my stop at a stop sign or two because vehicles that weren't really there, but I could tell, or I could see them loosely passing through. Not always cars either. Sometimes heavy machinery passing in front of me, and they were not really there. It was just, well, they were very translucent, but I knew that there was a presence in front of me and it was moving on the road. So I believe that there are times when we do have experiences of space and time folding, and that can be very strange and uncomfortable and sometimes a little scary. But yeah, I do believe those are uh, legitimate, real things that happen. So let's talk for a minute about the difference between spirits, because there can be differences. And when I say spirits, I want to be clear about this. Let's talk about manifestations for a moment. So you have your shadow people. Now, I have never seen a shadow person myself, but I've listened to people's encounters of shadow people, and I thoroughly believe that shadow people are a dark and negative energy They appear to be very scary from most of the time when I see people commenting about them or talking about their experience with shadow people. They seem very menacing. And I don't necessarily think I ever want to experience a shadow person, but hey, if it happens, it happens, I guess. Um, what people normally call ghost, or what I'm referring to as an earthbound spirit, uh, that is usually not a negative thing, although they can be angry and bitter. I find that it's usually people who have passed but are not. Um, they're either very attached to the world here, or they're afraid to move on, or they don't even know that they're dead. That not knowing that you've passed can be a bit of a problem, I suppose. So there's a tendency for people in those situations to linger, and so there's sort of a, I guess, a situation with that. Um, and in that case, uh, some people like to try to help them move on. Some people are opposed to that. I don't really have an opinion on it per se, but I question the people that say that they will sign contracts saying they will not try to cross somebody over if they go a ghost search or ghost hunt in some locations. So I'm not really sure how I feel about that, to be honest with you. Uh, really, I need to do some more soul searching, I guess, on that subject. So that's kind of how I feel about, or what I have to say about spirits. I really don't want to get into a prolonged discussion because I do want to kind of touch on a few other things as well. So let's talk, and this is a big one. This is a very big one because there's so many different facets to it, and that is UFOs and aliens. I was gonna save this one to last, but honestly, I want to talk about this now, while it's very fresh in my mind. Um, this is probably one of the most controversial subjects of all of them because there are those who say that all of that is dynamic, and that, of course, there are some people that say that everything is dynamic, but there are those who say that they believe that those are demons posing as aliens, all of it. Um, I don't know that I buy that either, to be honest with you. I mean, I believe that there's quite a bit of it that is dynamic, but I do, like I said, try to keep an open mind and try to believe that there may be the possibility that some of that is actually extraterrestrial. I don't know. I do know that I have seen uh, a UFO before, four of them actually flying in box formation uh, when I was much younger. And I've talked about that before on podcast and other podcast and on mine. So yeah, there is the question on my mind: what are they? Are they ours? Are they somebody else's? Are they from this planet? Are they from another dimension? Are they uh, are they from another world altogether, another galaxy? You know, some people say that it's rather eccentric and egocentric to believe that we are the only life in the universe. Other people say that they simply don't believe that God created life on any other planet but Earth. So there's a lot of schools of thought on that. So then there's the conspiracies behind it, believing that like that the government is going to use extraterrestrials as a way of bringing in the Antichrist. Extraterrestrials are going to try to con us into believing that they are the answer to our problems, and then deceive us into falling into their trap and enslaving us. There's a lot of conspiracy, a lot of conspiracy. Then there's the different types of uh, aliens reported, anything from humanoid to insect to reptilian to the grays, um, some robotic type aliens. Occasionally, you'll hear of something where aliens are connected somehow with cryptids. A lot of people have seen UFOs along with cryptid sightings, so there's maybe connection there, may not. It's kind of hard to say. It really depends on what school of thought that you belong to. And I know I'm being really vague about some of this, but honestly, I'm not going to, especially in this episode, I'm not going to try to debunk or denounce any school of thought here on in this episode, especially. That's not the purpose of this episode. I would like to talk about the some of the different phenomena surrounding UFOs. Cattle mutilations, for one, very interesting. I've done a lot of research in the past on cattle mutilations. These, so the thing that makes me wonder what's going on with that, and in recent years, I began to believe that something, somehow, our military is involved in that, or a military, maybe not ours, but a military of some type, is involved with cattle mutilations. Uh, Simply because one of the things that I've actually heard people say in some cases of abduction and so forth, and we'll talk about abduction in a moment. But having seen people in military uniforms aboard spacecraft along with aliens, so there's a tendency for me to believe that somewhere along the line, when it comes to cattle mutilations, because there's so many consistent reports of things like surgical incisions made uh, in ways that left no traces of blood. There was no blood, actually, there was no blood left in the bodies, but they were precise surgical incisions. Uh, the types of mutilations that take place are usually very similar or very much uh, unilateral. I should say lateral. Um, Eyes missing, rectum, genitalia, uh, sometimes different organs missing. But usually, in a lot of cases, there's always like a missing eye, sometimes ears, blood always missing, reproductive systems missing, that sort of thing. So, and these are pretty common. This is a pretty common event with this. And the incisions appear to be actually like laser incisions. They're the evidence around, like when they've done testing on the skin of these animals, the incision around them, they were actually seared at a high temperature. So whatever it is, it's not a surgical instrument. Uh, Animals could not be doing this, obviously, because animals don't leave high temperature uh, markings on wounds and so forth. So it's interesting that this is a common theme in all the reports or most of the reports. Some say that the animals don't deteriorate like normal animals when they're deceased. So there's that, and there's a lot of speculation as to what's going on with this. The fact that they take blood and reproductive organs and so forth, and other tissue samples, make me wonder if there's some kind of cloning going on, um, research of some kind, experimentation, grafting. I don't. It's so hard to say. It's really hard to say, but there's a lot that you can read into that, and I think it's very important for us to understand that um, on a scientific level, there's a lot of possibilities that could go into what exactly they're doing. You know, some people in the past have speculated that certain diseases are, are the result of experimentation in the lab using bovine and sheep and so forth. Um, I don't know. I don't know what to think about that, to be honest with you. Like I said, there's a lot of speculation on that. I do believe that it's definitely, like I said, I do believe that military is involved somehow. The black helicopters, for one, make me believe that there's probably black project uh, classification involved with it. You know, yeah, I've seen too much, too many reports and too many photographs to just kind of write it off and say that it's, animals or whatever else uh, that people want to say is happening instead. Uh, is it possible it could be extraterrestrial in origin? Of course, it's possible. Anything is possible. And then we get into the whole conversation of, are they using the parts for some kind of hybridization? Mm, I don't know. I don't, scientifically, I don't know how feasible that is, or what they would be doing, what their hybrid project is all about. I don't know. It would be interesting to find out. Do some in-depth research on the genetics there. I'm not a genetic engineer. Okay, I'm not a genetic scientist at all. Um, and it would take a long time to research that. So yeah, it's mind-boggling. It's very mind-boggling. Uh, and then we get into the abduction part of the CE5s. Uh, in those cases, I believe, uh, it's like you hear the reports of people saying that they've seen uh, babies that were hybrid babies. Some people believing that they've been inseminated or whatever, and then the baby just disappears. Uh, Men saying that they feel like they've been involved in reproduction um, type research, or um, subjected to some kind of examinations that made them think that it had something to do with reproduction systems. So, and then there are cases, I can't remember the exact case. It's been a long time since I've read some of these, but there was a Brazilian farmer who claimed years ago that he was abducted and was forced to have relations with an alien being, a female alien being. So, it's some of this, like when you get into the high strangeness, that's when I have to go, who could possibly make some of this stuff up? I mean, I know the human mind is a little warped, that we are in a state of fallen nature, so we can come up with some pretty weird stuff sometimes. But men tend not to, like, when it comes to being vulnerable in that sense, men tend to not report things like that. So the fact that this farmer came forward and was like, "Hey, this is what happened," and he was basically, saying that he was forced into the situation. Uh, that normally is very not reported by men. So, the fact that he came forward and he was like, "Yeah, this is what happened." It was just a very strange story. Very strange. Uh, the reports of people saying that they actually were taken aboard spacecraft and allowed to play with the children. They saw children. Some were introduced to children that were said to have been theirs. Um, I feel like it's really hard for me to comprehend why somebody would tell something that crazy if it wasn't true. I mean, I realize a lot of people, will do anything for 5 minutes of fame or whatever. But I find that it's very, I mean, how far would you really go? And you got to think, I mean, these people are risking a lot to just come out with some kind of outlandish story like that. I mean, you could be risking your job, your family, your marriage, um, your freedom to be walking around free. Uh, I mean, really think about it. It's just when I think about these stories, and some of them have drawn photos, like detailed photos, and I gotta tell you, there's some creative people in the world. There's some people with some crazy good imagination. But I can't imagine that there's that many people out there that can draw some of the drawings or describe some of the things they describe in the detail that they describe. And that's the part that kind of amazes me, is the amount of detail that they use when they describe these things. Now, I have a lot of kind of, like, I've over the years I've developed different theories. I've kind of gotten away from some of those. Um, do I believe that there is a possibility that there could be extraterrestrials that are doing hybrid projects where where um, babies are being created from human alien DNA? I mean, I guess if they, so one of the theories is they are us from the future. If that's the case, and I could see that happening, but they would have to be very similar to us in a lot of ways uh, to be able to do hybridization like that. That's the only thing. It's like scientifically, logically, like they have to have very similar DNA to do this. This is my only thing. So this would make me believe that A, they are either us from the future, or B, there's some kind of connection there. If aliens are really from another world. Now, if what some people say is true and aliens are, you know, dynamic entities posing as creatures from another planet, um, that's a whole new thing because I have some very strong beliefs about the idea of like the whole Nephilim thing and all that. I have some very strong beliefs about that. Um, some very strong questions about it. Honestly, do not believe that personally that angelic beings can mate with humans because humans are flesh and blood. Angels are not necessarily flesh and blood. While they can take on physical bodies, uh, there's just too many factors involved with angelic beings and the difference between angels and men for me to buy into the idea of angels reproducing with humans. Just that's really hard for me to buy. Like if you could give me scientific evidence, then yeah. But even there is biblical scripture, and I'm not going to pull it up and get into it, but there is scripture in the Bible. Jesus even said something about um, in heaven, in eternity, people would not be given over to marriage because they would be like the angels, um, meaning that they would be asexual. So even with that, Jesus actually said in the Gospels that angels did not produce or reproduce or be given over to marriage. And the concept of the Nephilim in the book of Genesis talks about them marrying the daughters of men. Now, I realize we're talking about fallen angels versus the heavenly host, but still, we are talking about beings that are predominantly spirits. I mean, yeah, there's some people that say they've actually seen flesh and blood demons. Maybe again, maybe they do have the ability, like angels, to be able to take on a physical form. But what are the laws surrounding that? We don't know. We just don't know. So again, trying to keep an open mind, but um, also being in conflict with my personal belief on what scripture is. Uh, it's really hard for me to buy the idea that angels can procreate, especially with humans. That's just I try to keep an open mind. I really do, but that one's very hard for me to buy into really. And I know the whole thing with, and we'll talk about this in a minute when I get into the cryptids. The whole thing about the cryptids being descendants of the Nephilim, I realize is a big topic with some people who research cryptids, and it's got why can I not remember the man's name all of a sudden now? God, I hate when that happens. I draw a blank. Um, there's, give me a second here. I'll look it up. I'll try to actually talk and research at the same time. Go figure. Um, I barely can talk and chew chewing gum at the same time sometimes. Scott Carpenter. Why that was so hard for me to remember, I don't know. Scott Carpenter was one of the people who believed in the whole concept of Nephilim being, or the cryptids being, the descendants of the Nephilim. Um, I mean, there are it. I can understand where that interpretation could come from, but again, you have to really look at uh, scripture very carefully sometimes to make a call on some beliefs, and for me, that just doesn't ring true. Um, but yeah, so there's the CE5, the abduction, which is uh, another part of the whole UFO and alien story that's quite controversial. There's a lot of speculation, a lot of thoughts behind that. Some people believe that they are, you know, some people believe that people are being taken and never returned. And that could be one of the reasons for a lot of the missing 411 cases that we see. I don't know. I don't know. I just, again, I've got ideas. We all have ideas. We all have some kind of opinion on this, maybe to a point. I haven't come up with, I'll say it like this, I have not come up with a firm conviction on some of this stuff, okay? Like, there are some things that people speak on and they say, I know for a fact. I really want to see all the evidence that you're basing your claim on. Because to state that strongly that you know something for a fact, like, I know that I cannot breathe underwater. That's a fact because I'm a human being and I got lungs, no gills. I know that I cannot flap my arms and fly. That's a fact. So, and there's scientific, well, there's stuff to back it up. All of that. Um, if nothing else, I challenge you to try to breathe underwater or go flap your arms and see if you fly. If you do, please take photos and video of that happening. And I'm not talking about breathing underwater with oxygen takes either. So let's get to the really big. Um, I've already touched on it with the whole thing with the cryptids being a part of, or the descendants of the Nephilim. Let's talk about cryptids for a minute. Now, again, this is a big topic in a way because it really depends on what cryptids you're talking about in a sense. Uh, when you get into the Mothmen, I want to believe that they're more interdimensional, possibly, and somehow connected with something beyond our comprehension altogether. Because there are things about the Mothman reports First of all, um, there's a lot of different phenomena that happens associated with the Mothman. Like if you read the Mothman prophecies, uh, that during that whole thing in Point Pleasant, there were UFO sightings. There were strange experiences with the creature called or the person known as Indrid Cole. Um, there's just a lot of different things that were happening there at the time. Not only just seeing cryptid, a winged cryptid, but a lot. Like there was reports uh, of ghostly kind of activity, poltergeist type activity happening in some places during that that they believed was kind of connected to somehow to Mothman. So I believe that these are probably some kind of interdimensional or um, other dimensional creatures. It's a very complex creature, whatever it is. Uh, I do believe that they exist. I believe there's too many stories of not only Point Pleasant but other places that have seen them, and too many descriptions that really match. The one thing that really stands out with everybody and seems to be like a lateral, um, it's concrete with all the descriptions are the eyes, the really compelling, bright red glowing eyes. Um, the abilities that this creature possess is there's a lot of them. There's a lot that was mentioned in that book. Uh, so if you get an opportunity, if you have not read the Mothman prophecies or have not seen any of the documentaries on the Mothman, I would strongly suggest checking it out. Uh, a lot of people say that the Mothman is a harbinger of doom. Appears to be, appears to be. But I definitely believe that it's somehow connected with something that is beyond our comprehension. Something that's way different than anything that we've ever experienced before. Definitely. It's not like the Bigfoot phenomena or the Dogman phenomena or seeing Nessie. It's not like any of that. It's something much different, much bigger, much more detailed. There's much more. There's too many different facets of this story for it to be something that we can just lump into one big. This is a big flying creature. There's a lot of big flying cryptid reports out there. Not like this. So I believe this is something that we have that is beyond our comprehension completely at this point in time. So let's talk about the whole thing with Bigfoot and Dogman. So there's a lot of speculation and belief, and like I said, Scott Carpenter really propagated this idea that Bigfoot, especially, um, is a descendant of the Nephilim. That sometimes somehow they have uh, an angelic bloodline. Now, I will say that it's very interesting when there are some reports, if you believe the DNA reports. Here's the thing of it. Again, there's a lot of questions about the DNA. I've heard so many different stories. I mean, here, the reason why we can't come to conclusions on any of this is because there's so much opinion, and there's not, like, just as sure as you talk about the DNA evidence, there's some joker that comes around and goes, well, but there were problems with the way that they did the DNA, and there was this and there was that. And then there are other people that are like, no, 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 that's not all what happened. So, you know, I am I am of the opinion that these are not necessarily the the descendants of fallen angels. What I will say is that part of the DNA is definitely human on the mother's side. In all of the DNA evidence, if you go by that, and the father's side is unknown if you go by the DNA evidence. So I understand that there is a tendency for people to rush into the Nephilim theory on that. I think there's a lot of possibilities. Uh, who's to say that they are not? I mean, a lot of people, here's an interesting thought in itself. A lot of people assume that the Fae are just always like little tiny creatures, the fairies are just little tiny creatures that flit around and they show up as like, you know, flying balls of light or whatever. But in reality, if you trace the stories and the history of the Fae, they come in all shapes and sizes. Some of them are the same size as regular human beings. Some of them even taller. So, as far as that goes, the Bigfoot could be and this is going to sound just as strange as the idea of angels, but I honestly believe it's more likely because there's no documentation that says that fairies can't. Like Jesus never said fairies can't mate with humans or that fairies don't mate. Jesus never even mentioned fairies. So let's assume for a moment that fairies are real, okay? Because I know some of you are like, well, fairies aren't really, there's no proof that fairies exist. Okay, well, yeah, okay, whatever. I beg to differ on that. With that said, I believe that it's more likely that Bigfoot is fathered by some other cryptid or some other being that is flesh and blood and possibly mated with a human. The fact that there's no DNA that matches the father, and they have countless specimens of DNA to match this with, is what's very interesting to me. There's no match for the father. If you believe the DNA evidence, again, I go back to that because there is a lot of people out there that say the DNA evidence is flawed. So you have to take that in consideration. There are some people that would argue whether the sky is blue or not. I know. I get it. Trust me, I get it. I really do. So so this is where I stand on it is I believe that there's something not known to mainstream science that is flesh and blood that Bigfoot is a descendant of on the father's side. I definitely believe that it is there is human DNA in there somewhere. I believe that it's humanoid, primate DNA somewhere. Do I believe there's some kind of ape? No, I do not. But primate, I do. Now wrap your head around that one when you get a chance. Okay, so Dogman, on the other hand, I definitely believe because of the violent nature of this being, I definitely believe it could possibly be some kind of dynamic beast. Again, I don't buy into the Nephilim theory with this. I'm sorry, guys. I just can't. I can't. Unless you give me, like, if you could get a DNA sample for the father and match it up, and it was dynamic DNA somehow, and they were able to say, "Yep, this was it," then I'd go with that. Okay, I would be more willing to go with that. But scripturally, as far as I can tell, it's not scriptural, and I'll get into what I think about the whole thing with what the sons of God and the daughters of men mean in a bit if I have time. Otherwise, I'll cover that on another video at another time. Um, I believe the dog man, however, is definitely a very dark energy. I've never heard any reports of Dogman being like warm and fuzzy at all. So I'm led to believe that this is definitely a very dynamic or dark energy. Uh, Definitely not one that's human friendly. Much like, actually, it. To be honest with you, every time I think about the Dogman and the stories that I've read about encounters with the Dogman and supposed Dogman mutilations and so forth, I think of the fiery salamanders because that's a elemental being that is not friends with man. The fiery salamanders will burn you any chance they get. They do not like human beings, and they are very much uh, to be on guard when you're around them. You just can't trust fire. You can't leave fire unattended, right? And that's because there's always fiery salamanders with fire, just like there's always water spirits with water. And that's kind of what I like. They have the same temperament. The dogmen are not a friend of man. They're not going to be your pet. They're not going to be like cute and cuddly. They're not going to like want you to pet them or to play chase with them or to throw them a stick. They are not that kind. That's not okay to do. You will wind up injured. So with the dog man, definitely a dark energy. There is no doubt about it. Now, I believe it could be dynamic. I don't believe that it's like a hybrid of human and demon. I don't believe demons mated with dogs to get it. Do I believe that demons could have um, somehow manipulated the DNA of animals? Definitely. Definitely. I think it could be some kind of hybrid experiment or something. I even believe it could be a military experiment. I don't know for sure. Like everybody else, we don't have a for sure answer about any of that. Um, the little people, again, another, you know, the story of the little people go back into the Celtic nations. Um, that's when you get into like fairies, leprechauns, gnomes, all those things that were the little people, the wee people. There's speculation and reports. I read like a 20-page report on the pygmy graves in Tennessee. There were thousands and thousands of them. Uh, this report was in a government publication, so of course they did not go the route of saying that these things were um, like 2 foot tall creatures. They went into a whole different spiel about this was a second burial, blah 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 blah. It was a lot of stuff that went into that. That kind of went, and the pygmy grays have been debated off and on for like ever since they were discovered. There's like been 3 or 4 waves of debates on the pygmy grays. What I will say about that is it's very interesting that there are thousands and thousands of these graves throughout the Cumberland Plateau area in particular. So it's very regional. That's very interesting. And when we get into some of the discussions of uh, present day dinosaurs and other winged creatures, um, the Jersey Devil, that sort of thing. Uh, I tend to believe that it's very possible that some of these things could be prehistoric creatures that have survived all this time. I mean, Loch Ness, the Loch Ness monster, very possible, very possible. Um, because we're finding species of fish that we thought were extinct for millions of years that they're finally finding, like miraculously, all of a sudden, oh, look, I caught this fish and it was supposed to be extinct a long time ago, but here it is in the here and now. So I tend to want to believe that when it comes um, to prehistoric creatures possibly still being in existence, I want to believe that that's likely, very likely. And I want to say that that's very likely because we have indication of aquatic animals that were believed to be extinct a very long time ago. There is video of uh, creatures, and I know a lot of people. Let's talk about AI for a minute. I know a lot of people are like, "Ah, they're all AI generated." I believe there's a lot of AI hoaxes out there. Okay, I'm not even gonna lie and say, "Oh no, it's not all AI. None of it's AI. It's all real." I know better. I know better. It's not all real. It is definitely some of it is AI generated. But when it comes right down to it, you can't doubt every single video. I mean, you could, but let's do some analyzing. Let's have professionals analyze it before we get too involved in and legitimate professionals, not people that just come on and say, I'm a professional, this and that and another, and da 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 da. And and they show no credentials, they show you no evidence to back up their claim. And the reason why I say it would be really good for them to have evidence to back up their claim is because, like AI can generate so much stuff, we come up with some really great, like I could literally tell you, I am a descendant of the Princess of Wales. And without any documentation to back that up, you're most likely not going to believe it. Well, It's the same thing with making claims online without, like in a video, without actually documenting your credentials. Just saying. I'd like to have proof that the people who are doing the examination of these videos are legitimate. If you're going to try to debunk something, debunk the fact that are faking uh, who you say you are. That's what I'm saying here. So anyway, I like honestly that's my thing in a nutshell is there are no definitive answers to the paranormal at this time. I do not think that any one person has all the answers to any of this at this point. I do not think any one person is ever going to have all the answers. So, you as we begin to do more and more research, as we begin to find out more and more, uh, and more evidence is gained and so forth, we'll discover more of the answers. We already know for a fact. Uh, I will say this: I thoroughly believe in the existence of cryptids, of spirits, of UFOs. I am of the belief of the existence of all the paranormal that we talk about. Okay, no doubt that it really exists. The questions are, though, what is it? Where does it come from? What's its purpose? What's its abilities? Give us an introduction. Let us know what it is and all the nuts and bolts to it. And then we will have figured it out, right? So, yes, my opinion is that these things exist. Do we have definitive answers? No, we do not. So we'll keep searching, we'll keep questioning, we will keep doing the research and the boots on the ground, and we will keep sorting through the data as we get it. And we'll make a determination sooner or later. Hopefully, some of it we'll discover in my lifetime. I would like to go to my grave knowing some things without having so many questions. But if not, maybe a future generation. Anyway, so that is my my groundwork on the paranormal. At some point, I may go into a deeper discussion about in individual videos about each one of these. I've covered some things about the ghost and ghostly phenomena already in another video. And actually, I believe I'm going to tag that one to this one. So if you look at the end of this, you will see that video. If you have not seen it, please go like, share, and comment on that video. And yeah, if you're seeing me for the first time and you like this video, please subscribe, like, share, and comment. Meanwhile, I will see you again soon. My name is Daniel Cahoon. This is Magical Journey, and may your journey always be magical.